I couldn't breathe. The lawyer's office felt too small, too hot, even though it was a cold March afternoon. I stood there in my black funeral dress, the same one I'd worn 3 days ago when we buried Grandmother Vivian. The fabric scratched against my skin. Everything felt wrong. Mr. Patterson sat behind his enormous wooden desk, reading from papers in his boring lawyer voice. My brother Nathan stood to my left, tall and confident in his expensive suit. He always looked like he belonged in rooms like this. I never did. To my grandson, Nathan Bennett, Mr. Patterson read, "I leave my yacht, the Serendipity, currently docked in Marina del Rey." Nathan smiled. I knew that yacht. $2 million worth of pure white beauty. I also leave him my penthouse apartment in Manhattan, along with all furnishings and contents. My mother Diane squeezed Nathan's shoulder proudly. Aunt Carol whispered something to Uncle Jim. Everyone nodded like this made perfect sense. And finally, to Nathan Bennett, I leave Bennett Real Estate Company in its entirety, including all assets, properties, and holdings. $15 million. I'd heard the number whispered at the funeral. $15 million in buildings and land and business deals I didn't understand. Nathan shook hands with people. My cousin Jennifer got grandmother's jewelry collection. Aunt Carol received $50,000. Uncle Jim got stocks and bonds. Even my second cousin, who I'd only met twice, got grandmother's car. Then Mr. Patterson looked at me, to my granddaughter Claire Bennett. My heart hammered. I didn't expect a yacht or a company. I wasn't stupid. I knew Nathan was always grandmother's choice for business things. But maybe some money for art supplies. Maybe her book collection. She knew I loved books. Mr. Patterson reached into his drawer and pulled out a small envelope. It was wrinkled and yellowed, like it had been sealed a long time ago. That was it, just an envelope. The room went quiet in a different way than before. This was the quiet of people trying not to react. I heard someone shift their weight. A tiny cough. I stepped forward and took the envelope. It felt light, almost empty. Then Nathan laughed. Not a big loud laugh, but a chuckle that made my face go hot. "Seriously?" he said, not even trying to whisper. Other people joined in, uncomfortable giggles. Aunt Carol actually put her hand over her mouth, but her shoulders shook. "Well?" My mother said in that voice she uses when she feels sorry for me, "I'm sure it's something sentimental." "Claire, honey, you know Mother Vivian always had a soft spot for you. You were too gentle for business anyway." My hands shook as I opened the envelope. Everyone watched. I could feel their eyes on me like hot lights. Inside was a plane ticket. I pulled it out and stared at it. Rome. A flight to Rome, Italy, 5 days from now. There was also a small card, the kind that comes with flowers. I recognized grandmother's handwriting immediately, shaky from her illness, but still beautiful. "Follow your heart home, Nana." That was all. No explanation, no money, no property, just a trip and 5 words that made no sense. Nathan laughed harder now. "A vacation? She left you a vacation?" "Oh, Claire!" Aunt Carol said, her voice dripping with pity. That's sweet, I suppose." Maybe she finally lost it at the end, Nathan said to Uncle Jim, loud enough for everyone to hear. Grandmother was pretty out of it those last few weeks. My mother touched my shoulder. "We can maybe sell the ticket, honey, get you some cash instead." I couldn't speak. My throat had closed up completely. I stood there holding a plane ticket and a card while my brother got an empire. Mr. Patterson cleared his throat. "That concludes the reading of the will." People started talking, congratulating Nathan, making plans to go to lunch. I stood frozen in the middle of the room. Why Rome? Grandmother had mentioned Italy sometimes when I was little. She was born there, but she'd lived in America for 50 years. What was in Rome? Why would she do this to me? In front of everyone. I'd spent every Saturday of my childhood with her. I'd held her hand at the end when she was dying. I'd loved her so much it felt like my chest was cracked open. And she'd left me a plane ticket while everyone else got treasure. That night, I sat alone in my tiny apartment, staring at the ticket on my coffee table. My eyes were so full of tears that the words blurred together. Was this her way of telling me what everyone already knew? That I was the disappointment? The granddaughter who didn't matter enough for anything real? The card sat next to the ticket. "Follow your heart home." But my home was here, wasn't it? I picked up the ticket again, and something broke inside me. I started crying for real, big ugly sobs that shook my whole body. I didn't understand. I didn't understand any of it. I didn't leave my apartment for 2 days. I called work and told them I had the flu. My boss said to take the time I needed. I think she felt bad because she knew about the funeral. I spent those days on my couch, wrapped in blankets, staring at old photo albums. I had 3 of them, all filled with pictures of grandmother and me. There was one of us in her garden when I was 6. She was teaching me to paint with watercolors. My hands were covered in blue paint, and I was laughing. She was smiling at me like I was the most important person in the world. Another photo showed us baking cookies in her kitchen. I was maybe 8 years old, flour dusted across my nose. Grandmother wore her pearl necklace even while baking. She always looked elegant, even doing normal things. I remembered those Saturdays so clearly now. Every single Saturday when I was little, Mom would drop me off at grandmother's house. Nathan never came. He had soccer practice, then debate club, then student council meetings. He was always busy with important things. But I had grandmother all to myself. We would sit in her garden under the big oak tree, and she would tell me stories about Italy, about the hills that rolled like green waves, about churches older than America, about markets filled with bright vegetables and flowers. In Toscana, she would say, her accent getting thicker when she talked about home. The sunlight is different. It is golden, like honey. It makes everything beautiful. She taught me Italian words. Bella meant beautiful. Bambina meant little girl. Amore meant love. Bella Bambina, she would whisper, touching my cheek with her soft hands. You have the Castellano heart. I never knew what that meant. I thought maybe it meant I was kind or gentle or something like that. Sometimes grandmother's eyes would get far away and sad. She would stare at nothing, and I could tell she was seeing something I couldn't. Somewhere else. Someone else, maybe. Nonna? I would ask. I called her Nonna because she taught me that was Italian for grandmother. She would blink and come back to me, smiling again. Mi dispiace, sweet girl, I was just remembering. Everything changed when I turned 12 and Nathan turned 16. Suddenly, Nathan started coming to grandmother's house too. But not for garden time or stories, for business meetings. He would sit in her office and she would teach him about real estate, about buying and selling, about investments and profit margins. Everyone said Nathan was following in her footsteps. He's going to run the company someday, Uncle Jim would say proudly. The boy's got Vivian's business mind. I still had my Saturdays with grandmother, but they felt different, smaller somehow, like they didn't matter as much. Except grandmother never made me feel that way. She still held my hand, still told me stories, still taught me new Italian words. One day, sweet girl, she whispered to me when I was 15 and crying because I didn't get into the same college as Nathan. You will understand everything. You will see why you are exactly who you need to be. I didn't believe her then. On the 3rd day after the will reading, my phone rang at 11 at night. It was Nathan. Little sister, he shouted. I could hear music and voices in the background. He was at a bar somewhere, celebrating probably. Did I wake you? No, I said quietly. I just wanted to check on you. You know, about the will thing? He was slurring his words. Definitely drunk. At least you got a vacation out of it, right? That's something. I didn't answer. I mean, it's weird that grandmother gave you just that. Maybe she felt sorry for you or something, you know, because you never really did anything big with your life. Something hot flashed through my chest. But hey, Nathan continued, Rome is supposed to be nice. Eat some pasta for me. Take some pictures of old buildings. He laughed at his own joke. I hung up. My hands were shaking, but not from sadness this time. From anger. From something else I couldn't name. I looked at the plane ticket still sitting on my coffee table. Grandmother wasn't cruel. She had never been cruel to me, not once in 28 years. So why would she start at her death? Maybe there was something in Rome. Maybe this meant something I didn't understand yet. You will understand everything, her voice echoed in my memory. I stood up and pulled my suitcase from the closet. I didn't know what I would find in Rome. Maybe nothing. Maybe it really was just a weird final gift from a sick old woman. But I owed her this much. After all those Saturdays, all those stories, all that love. I would go. I packed my clothes, requested a week off work, and 3 days later, I boarded a plane. My heart pounded the entire flight. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat the airplane food. I just kept thinking about grandmother's face, her smile, her secrets, and I wondered what she wanted me to find. The plane landed in Rome on a Tuesday morning. The sun was so bright it hurt my eyes when I looked through the tiny airplane window. My whole body ached. I hadn't slept at all during the 9-hour flight. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw grandmother's face. I heard Nathan's laughter. I felt that envelope in my shaking hands. I grabbed my carry-on bag and followed the crowd of passengers through the airport. Everything was in Italian. Signs, announcements, conversations flowing around me like a river I couldn't understand. I felt so lost. What was I even doing here? I didn't have a hotel reservation. I didn't have a plan. I had a ticket to Rome and a card that said, "Follow your heart home," and that was it. Maybe I was supposed to just walk around the city for a few days, see the Colosseum, eat pizza, take pictures, then go back to my regular life and try to forget that my grandmother gave my brother everything and gave me basically nothing. My eyes burned with tears again. I blinked them away hard. The airport was huge and crowded. I walked toward the exit, pulled along by the flow of people. My suitcase rattled behind me on its broken wheel. I needed to find a taxi, find a cheap hotel, figure out what to do next. Then I saw him. A man in a black suit stood near the exit doors. He was older, maybe 60, with silver hair combed perfectly back. He held a white sign with black letters. Claire Bennett. My name on a sign in Rome. I stopped walking so suddenly that someone bumped into me from behind. They said something angry in Italian and moved around me. I stared at the sign. At the man. He was looking at the crowd carefully, searching faces. Then his eyes found mine. Something changed in his expression. Recognition, maybe, or surprise. "Miss Bennett?" he called out. My feet moved on their own. I walked toward him slowly, my heart beating so hard I could feel it in my throat. "Yes," I whispered. "I'm Claire Bennett." The man smiled. It was a kind smile, warm and real. "I am Antonio Rossini. I worked for Signora Vivian." Signora. That was Italian for Mrs. He reached for my suitcase. "Please, let me take this. Come with me." "Wait." I pulled the suitcase back. My head was spinning. "I don't understand. What is this? How did you know I would be here?" "The Signora arranged everything before she passed," Antonio said gently. "She told me exactly when you would arrive. She told me to bring you home." Home? Rome wasn't my home. I'd never even been to Italy before. But I don't. My voice cracked. I don't understand why I'm here. Antonio's expression was patient. He'd probably dealt with confused people before. "Please, Miss Bennett, I have a car waiting. It is better if we talk on the way." I should have been scared. I should have called someone or asked more questions. A strange man picking me up in a foreign country where I didn't speak the language. But something about Antonio felt safe. And besides, grandmother had sent me here. Somehow, she had planned this. I followed him outside into the bright Italian sunshine. The air smelled different than New York, sweeter somehow. Warmer. A sleek black car was parked at the curb. Antonio opened the trunk and put my suitcase inside like it weighed nothing. Then he opened the back door for me. I stood there, one hand on the car door, frozen. "Please," I said, and my voice came out desperate. "Please just tell me what this is about. Why did my grandmother send me here? What am I supposed to do?" Antonio looked at me for a long moment. His dark eyes were intelligent and kind. He seemed to be deciding something. Then he spoke slowly and clearly, 6 words in his accented English. "You inherited her real family empire." The airport noise faded away. The honking cars, the rolling suitcases, the shouting voices, everything went quiet and far away. I stared at him. "What?" The word came out as barely a whisper. "Empire." He said, "Empire." "I know you have many questions," Antonio said gently. He gestured to the open car door. Please, Miss Bennet, get in. We have a long drive ahead of us. Everything will be explained. But we must go now. There is much you need to see. My legs felt weak. I gripped the car door to steady myself. An empire. Grandmother had an empire here, in Italy. And she left it to me. I looked at Antonio's face, searching for a joke or a mistake. But he looked back at me with complete seriousness. My hands were shaking as I climbed into the car. The leather seats were soft and cool. Antonio closed the door and walked around to the driver's seat. As he started the engine, I stared out the window at Rome passing by, and I couldn't feel my fingers. Nothing made sense. Everything was about to change. The car left the city behind. I sat in the back seat, gripping my knees, trying to breathe normally. Antonio drove in silence. Classical music played softly from the speakers. I wanted to ask 1,000 questions. I wanted to scream, but my voice wouldn't work. An empire. The words kept repeating in my head like a song I couldn't stop hearing. What empire? Grandmother built Bennett Real Estate in New York. That's what Nathan inherited. That was the only business she had. Wasn't it? The buildings got smaller and farther apart. Soon we were out of Rome completely, driving through countryside. I pressed my face to the window. Rolling hills stretched out on both sides of the road, green and gold and perfect. Vineyards lined the hills in neat rows that looked like someone had combed them. Olive trees twisted up from red soil. Old stone walls ran along the road, crumbling in some places, covered in ivy in others. It looked exactly like grandmother's stories. The golden light. The green hills like waves. Everything beautiful. Where are we going? I finally managed to ask. Antonio glanced at me in the rearview mirror. To the Castellano estate, Miss Bennet. Your home. My home is in New York, I said automatically. Antonio didn't argue. He just smiled slightly and kept driving. We drove for over an hour. My phone had no service. I watched the Italian countryside roll past and felt like I was dreaming. Then Antonio turned down a narrow road. Cypress trees lined both sides, tall and dark green, making a tunnel of shade. The road went on and on. Finally, we came around a bend. I stopped breathing. In front of me stood the most beautiful house I had ever seen. No, not a house, a villa. 3 stories of honey-colored stone that seemed to glow in the afternoon sunday. The roof was made of terracotta tiles, faded to a soft orange. Windows with dark green shutters looked out over gardens that went on forever. Flowers spilled from pots. Vines climbed the walls. A fountain stood in the circular driveway, water splashing from a stone angel's hands. I couldn't finish the sentence. Antonio stopped the car in front of the villa. This was my grandmother's? I whispered. This is yours, Antonio said, turning to look at me. The Signora left it to you, Miss Bennet. The villa, the vineyards you saw on the drive, the olive groves, and the Castellano fashion house in Milan. The car felt too small, too hot. Black spots danced in my vision. Fashion house? My voice came out high and strange. What fashion house? My grandmother ran a real estate company. She sold buildings. She never mentioned any of this. She never. I couldn't finish. My thoughts were spinning too fast. Antonio got out and opened my door. Come, Miss Bennet. Someone is waiting to meet you. My legs shook as I stepped out of the car. The air smelled like flowers and herbs and sunshine. Somewhere nearby, I heard birds singing. The villa's front door opened. A woman stepped out onto the stone steps. She was older, maybe mid-70s, with white hair twisted into a bun. She wore a simple blue dress and pearls. The moment she saw me, her hand flew to her mouth. Madonna, she breathed. Then she rushed down the steps faster than I thought someone her age could move. She was crying and laughing at the same time, speaking in rapid Italian I couldn't understand. She reached me and took my face in both hands. Her hands were soft and warm. Tears ran down her wrinkled cheeks. I'm sorry, I said weakly. I don't understand. I don't speak Italian. This is Francesca Castellano, Antonio said beside me. Your grandmother's sister. Your great-aunt. The world tilted. Grandmother's sister. I had an aunt in Italy, living in this villa. And I never knew. Francesca switched to English. Her accent was thick, much stronger than grandmother's had been. "Let me look at you," she said, still holding my face. "Oh, sweet child, you look just like her, just like our mother, the same eyes, the same face." More tears spilled down her cheeks. "I don't understand," I said, and I was crying too now. Why didn't anyone tell me? Why didn't grandmother say anything? Francesca pulled me into a hug. She smelled like lavender and something sweet I couldn't name. She held me tight, like she'd been waiting years to do this. "Vivian sent you home," she whispered into my hair. "Finally, after all this time, she sent you home to us." Home. That word again. I stood in the arms of a stranger who wasn't really a stranger, in front of a villa I'd never seen, in a country I'd never visited. And somehow, impossibly, something deep in my chest said yes. Francesca led me inside the villa. My legs felt like water, but I followed her through the entrance hall. The floors were made of marble, with patterns swirling through them like cream in coffee. Paintings covered the walls. Old paintings of people I didn't know, wearing clothes from 100 years ago. We walked down a hallway and into a library. I stopped in the doorway and stared. Books lined every wall from floor to ceiling. A ladder on wheels stood ready to reach the high shelves. 2 leather chairs sat near a fireplace. Windows looked out over the gardens. Late afternoon light poured in, making everything warm and golden. "Sit, please," Francesca said, gesturing to one of the chairs. I Saturday. The leather was soft and worn, like many people had sat there before me. Francesca disappeared through another door and came back carrying a wooden box. It was dark leather, about the size of a shoebox, with a small brass lock. She set it on the table between us and sat down in the other chair. "Your grandmother wanted you to know everything," Francesca said softly. "She wrote it all down for you." She opened the box. Inside were letters, dozens of them, all in envelopes with my name written on them in grandmother's handwriting. "She never sent them," Francesca said. "She wrote them, but she kept them here, waiting for the day you would come." "Whoa!" My hands shook as I reached for the first one. The envelope was yellowed with age. The date written in the corner said 25 years ago. Right after I was born. I opened it carefully. The paper inside was thin and covered in grandmother's beautiful handwriting. "My dearest Claire, it started. I held you today for the first time. You are 3 weeks old and perfect. When you opened your eyes and looked at me, I saw my own mother looking back. You have her eyes, the Castellano eyes." I cried. I kept reading, tears blurring the words. Grandmother wrote about the Castellano family, about how we came from a long line of artists and designers and creators. Her own mother had started a small dress shop in Tuscany that grew into something bigger. A fashion house that made wedding gowns and evening dresses for wealthy women all over Italy. When my mother died, the letter said, she left the business to me. I was 23 and had no idea what I was doing, but I learned. I grew it. The Castellano name became known for beauty and elegance. My hands trembled as I set down the first letter and picked up another. This one was dated 15 years ago, when I was 13. "I watched you draw today, Claire. You showed me pictures of fairies and forests. Your hands moved across the paper like they were dancing. You have it. The gift. The Castellano gift for creating beauty. I see it in you so clearly." Another letter, then another. Year after year, grandmother had written to me. She wrote about watching me grow, about recognizing something in me that she said ran in our blood, the ability to see beauty and make it real. She wrote about Nathan, too. "Your brother has a good mind for business. He understands numbers and deals. He will do well with the American company. But you, my darling girl, you have something different. You have the soul of our family, the heart." I looked up at Francesca. Tears ran down my face, hot and fast. "I don't understand. Why didn't she tell me any of this? Why keep it secret?" Francesca sighed deeply. "Your mother, Diane, she never understood our family. She thought money and property were the only things that mattered. Vivian was afraid." "Afraid of what?" "That if everyone knew about Italy while she was still alive, they would fight over it. Your mother and Nathan would say it should be split between you both. They would take it to court. Tie it up in lawyers for years and years." Francesca leaned forward. So Vivian kept it secret. Even from you. She made all the legal papers here in Italy where American courts could not touch them. And she waited. For what? For her death to make it final, to make sure no one could take this from you. I picked up another letter. This one was from just 5 years ago. The fashion house is worth 40 million euros now, Claire. The villa and land, another 10 million. I have kept it all safe for you. Nathan will have his fortune in America. But this, our real family legacy, this is yours. Because you are the one who will love it, who will protect it, who will keep the Castellano name alive. I couldn't breathe right. 40 million euros, the villa, the fashion house, all of it mine. I know this is much to take in, Francesca said gently. I laughed, but it came out choked. That's an understatement. I looked down at the box full of letters, years and years of grandmother's thoughts, her plans, her love. All this time, I thought I was the one who didn't matter. But she had been protecting this for me, building it for me, waiting until the perfect moment to give it to me. There is more to see, Francesca said. Tomorrow, we go to Milan, to the fashion house. You need to meet the people who work there. They have been waiting to meet you. I nodded, unable to speak. I spent the rest of the evening reading letters, crying, and feeling like my whole life had been turned upside down. Everything I thought I knew was wrong. I spent 3 days in Italy learning about my inheritance. Francesca took me to Milan to see the Castellano fashion house. It wasn't a huge factory. It was a beautiful boutique in an old building with tall windows. Inside, women worked on wedding gowns and evening dresses. Each one was made by hand. Each one took weeks to finish. The workers stared at me when I walked in. An older woman named Lucia started crying. She said I looked exactly like my great-grandmother in the portrait that hung in the office. I met with lawyers who showed me papers. Everything was in Italian and English both. They explained that grandmother had set this up decades ago. The Italian properties and business were completely separate from the American ones, legally separate. Nathan had no claim to any of it. I toured the vineyards, tasted wine that came from grapes grown on my own land. The thought made me dizzy. At night, I sat in the villa library reading more of grandmother's letters. Each one made me understand more, made me feel less like a disappointment and more like someone who had been chosen for something special. For the first time in my life, I felt like I fit somewhere. Then, on the 4th day, Nathan arrived. I was in the garden sketching flowers when I heard shouting from inside the villa, a man's voice, angry and loud. My stomach dropped. I knew that voice. I walked back to the villa slowly, my heart pounded. Through the open windows, I could hear Nathan yelling at someone, probably Antonio or Francesca. I found them in the entrance hall. Nathan stood in the middle of the marble floor, his face red and twisted with anger. He still wore his business suit, but it was wrinkled from travel. His hair stuck up on one side. Francesca stood near the stairs, her arms crossed, her face cold. Nathan saw me and pointed. "You knew about this!" he shouted. "You manipulated her. You poisoned grandmother against me." "I didn't know anything," I said. My voice came out quieter than I wanted, but steady. "She kept it secret from everyone, including me." "Liar!" Nathan took a step toward me. "You spent every weekend with her. All those years, you must have known. You must have convinced her to cut me out." Something hot flashed through my chest, anger I'd been holding down for years. "Cut you out?" I said louder now. "Nathan, she gave you $15 million. A yacht, a penthouse, an entire company. How is that being cut out? This should be split." He gestured wildly at the villa, at everything around us. "This should be half mine. It's not fair that you get all of this just because you sucked up to her your whole life." "That is enough," Francesca said sharply. Her English was perfect when she was angry. "Your grandmother was not a fool. She knew exactly what she was doing." Nathan turned his fury on her. "You did this. You poisoned her against me. You and this whole Italian side of the family she kept secret. This is manipulation. This is elder abuse. I'm going to sue. I'm going to fight this in court." "You will lose," Francesca said coldly. "We'll see about that." Nathan pulled out his phone. My lawyers are already looking into this. There's no way this is legal. No way she could just give away millions without... Without what? I interrupted. Without asking your permission? Nathan, this was never yours. This was set up before we were even born. Grandmother had 2 separate lives. 2 separate inheritances. She gave each of us what suited us. Nathan stared at me like he'd never seen me before. Listen to yourself, he said, his voice dripping with mean laughter. You think you're better than me now? You think some old villa and a dress shop makes you special? You're still the same boring little Claire who never did anything important. The words should have hurt. A week ago, they would have destroyed me. But I'd read grandmother's letters. I'd seen what she built, what she saved for me. No, I said quietly, but I think grandmother knew me better than I knew myself. She gave you a business you understand, money you know how to use. She gave you what matched who you are. I stepped closer to him. But this... I gestured to the villa, to the gardens, to the centuries of family history in these walls. This was never meant for someone who would just sell it for profit. This was meant for someone who would love it. Nathan's jaw clenched. His hands balled into fists. You don't deserve this, he hissed. Maybe not, I said. But grandmother thought I did, and I'm going to prove her right. We stood there staring at each other. Brother and sister, strangers now. Finally, Nathan turned and stormed toward the door. You'll hear from my lawyers, he shouted back. Then he was gone. I stood in the entrance hall, shaking, my heart racing. Francesca walked over and put her hand on my shoulder. You did well, she said softly. I nodded, but I couldn't speak. Everything had changed between Nathan and me, and I knew it would never go back. Nathan left Italy still shouting threats. But 2 weeks later, his lawyers sent a message. There was nothing they could do. The Italian assets were completely separate. Set up in Italian law decades ago. Ironclad, the American lawyers said. Nathan had no legal claim to any of it. I should have felt happy. Instead, I just felt sad. My brother and I barely spoke now. Maybe we never really had. I stayed at the villa. Days turned into weeks. Francesca taught me about the business, about the family, about everything grandmother had kept hidden. One evening, we sat in the library, drinking tea. The sun was setting outside, painting everything gold. Why did she leave? I asked. Why did grandmother leave Italy if she loved it so much? Francesca smiled, but it was a sad smile. She fell in love with your grandfather, Thomas. He was American, visiting Italy after college. Vivian met him at a party in Florence. She said he was kind and gentle and made her laugh. I remembered grandfather. He died when I was 8, but I remembered his quiet smile, the way he would read to me. Thomas asked her to marry him, Francesca continued, but he had to go back to America. His family was there. His life was there. So Vivian chose love. She married him and moved to New York. But she kept all of this, I said, gesturing around us. Yes, she ran it from far away. She visited twice a year, always alone. She told Thomas it was for business, which was true. But really, she was keeping her heart alive, the Italian part of herself. She could not live here, so she made sure it would survive. For the right person. For me, I whispered. For you! I made my decision that night. I called my landlord in New York and gave up my apartment. I called my illustration clients and told them I was moving to Italy but could still work remotely. Most of them said yes. I was staying. Francesca cried happy tears when I told her. She hugged me and said grandmother would be so proud. Over the next few months, I learned the fashion business. I met with designers and fabric suppliers. I watched Lucia and the other women create beautiful gowns with their skilled hands. I started drawing designs of my own, just for fun at first. Then Lucia saw them and said they were good. Really good. Maybe I had inherited more than property. Maybe I had inherited talent too. I made the villa my home. I learned Italian slowly, stumbling over words but getting better. I walked through the vineyards at sunset. I painted in the garden. I felt the golden Tuscan light that grandmother had told me about all those years ago. She was right. It did make everything beautiful. One night, 6 months after I first arrived, I found the last letter in the leather box. I had been saving it, afraid somehow to read grandmother's final words. The envelope was marked "Read Last." I sat in the library by lamplight and opened it carefully. My dearest Claire, if you are reading this, you have found your way home. I am sorry I could not tell you in life. I was a coward about many things. But I was brave about this. I made sure you would have the chance to bloom where you were always meant to be planted. Not in the cold concrete of New York ambition, but here, in the warm soil of your ancestors. Your brother will be rich, but you, my darling girl, you will be whole. That is my final gift to you. The world will say I was unfair. Let them talk. A grandmother's job is not to be fair. It is to truly SE each child and give them what their soul needs. I saw you, Claire. I always saw you. You have the Castellano heart, the one that creates beauty, the one that loves deeply, the one that understands that some things matter more than money. Live here, love here, create here, make this place bloom again with your gifts, and know that every sunset you watch from the villa garden, I am watching it with you. Welcome home, my bella bambina. Con amore, Nonna Vivian. I folded the letter carefully, tears streaming down my face. But they were not sad tears this time. They were grateful tears, healing tears. I thought about the funeral, about standing in that lawyer's office while everyone laughed, about the small wrinkled envelope that seemed like nothing. That plane ticket wasn't a consolation prize. It wasn't an insult or a throwaway gift. It was a key to a life I never knew existed, a key to a version of myself I never got to be, a key to home. Let Nathan have his 15 million and his buildings. Let him have his yacht and his Manhattan penthouse. I had something worth more. I had belonging. I had purpose. I had roots that went back generations into this Italian soil. I walked to the window and looked out at the gardens bathed in moonlight. Somewhere in the distance, I heard music from the village. The air smelled like jasmine and earth. I finally understood what grandmother meant all those years ago. I had the Castellano heart, and now I was home.